Okay, welcome. It is the 5th of June. Hello, Ron. How are you? Good to see you again, my friend.
Hey, Phil.
How's it going? We have a fantastic AI guest now. His name is Greg Duffy. He's no relation, even though he looks so similar to me.
Just hey, let's kind of
deny.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing.
Yes, he's a now we had him on
I'm an avatar.
Like exactly. We did a podcast on AI last week, and because we don't have the real knowledge about these things, we decided to ask Greg. Okay, give us having a chat. Greg is the co-founder of a company called GapX, and what he does consulting and AI infrastructure. So, do you want to explain a little bit more about that, Greg, before we start, or did I get it right there?
No, that's pretty much it, Phil. We're addressing the biggest challenge companies have, which is trying to understand how to realize the ambition of what AI can deliver. So, you got all these boards who are saying you got to cut cost by 30% or increase productivity by 30%, or you got to do all the. So businesses obviously have got to implement plans to deal with that. And to be honest with you, everyone's still trying to figure it out. And so it's an incredibly complex world, and it involves huge cultural change. And that's our focus: is how do you get people to work with AI rather than fear it? But it's a long journey. So anyway, enough about GapX.
Well, I would say that we were talking, Ronan and myself were talking last week, especially with Ronan as a doctor. So how is AI going to change medicine? So what was your sort of what was your topics you wanted to sort of talk about, Ronan, in terms of medicine?
Okay. Well, it's obviously, like, as in every walk of life, it's going to have a huge effect, and is having a huge effect. And indeed, Greg would know a lot more about that probably than I would. But I think, and of course, the big question for me is how much of the actual, if you like, physical work of medicine is AI through the aid of robotics or whatever, or even just a kind of a very realistic sort of AI you might talk to as a consultation. You just wonder how far that can go, because I think you mentioned, we talked about another issue with like elder care. It's like people might kind of still want that human interaction, or the hand on the shoulder, or listen, I'm here. You know what I mean? As opposed to a machine which potentially mightn't be able to feel empathy, or
Yeah, I mean, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think the way to look at it, and this doesn't just apply to medicine, it applies across everything. We're kind of going through a bit of a revolution in the world, and so many every area of business has been affected by it. And so let's focus in on medicine. The challenge is you have to remember that at the end of the day, you've got a patient, there's a human being, and you've got what's the best way to give them care, and what's the best way for them to interact in the world with thinking of the patient first as opposed to profit. And the reality is, and I think this again applies to all walks of life. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather see a doctor, or see a doctor that uses AI, or work with AI? In other words, if you're a patient, which three would you rather go to?
Well, I would probably an actual doctor, but who works with AI.
Right, because here's the thing.
Probably be my choice, yeah.
Yeah, and because remember what that doctor has, right? So the doctor would look at you and say, okay, I've got your case history here. I've got information on you as a patient. I've also got access to the internet. I've got an AI model assisting me here, and that they're able to take your information, apply that into global pictures of millions of patients, millions of clinicians, millions of doctors who are interpreting that data and who have fed that information results back in. So AI can take all that, apply a bunch of probabilities and say, well, based on this patient, it's got these three conditions. And in fact, this is the priority one. This is the one less priority. But because it's just using information, pushing that through AI, and AI is coming back with a set of probabilities that said this is the most likely thing. It's exactly what a doctor does anyway. Like if you looked at somebody, it's all based on experience and probabilities, right? So if you're seeing a patient and AI is there with you, validating what you're seeing, but also looking for the things that maybe you haven't experienced. So, but the great thing is that it increases your productivity as a doctor, because what you end up doing is, funny enough, you'll end up spending more time with the patient from a care perspective than you will, because you're moving your position up to a higher level, like, in working with that patient. You're focusing on the individual and that care piece. AI is doing the thinking. So you're a facilitator. But and this is the important thing, and everyone talks about this in all walks of life, that well, I think you have to look at all the case you have to look at all the case studies coming out of the States on this stuff, right? Like if I go to the internet and I ask a question, I give it symptoms, and it comes back with the diagnosis and says you've got A, B, C, right? Now the chances are I haven't given it all the symptoms, or I've missed stuff. The doctor in the room there will make sure that nothing's missed, or at least get very close to that, right? So that's the first thing. So that's why you need the doctor in the room. Now, the biggest reason AI fails is because the question that's constructed is incomplete. And if in other words, if you ask a complete question, the AI will come back with an appropriate statistical comparison that'll say I have 98% probability that the full answer I'm giving you is right. Now, there's far more to it than that, but that is all about the question, and it's about reframing the question. So if you're working with if the doctor's working with AI, and it says my diagnosis is, here's the 6 symptoms. I've had a good long chat with in fact, the AI is listening as well. And is part of the conversation. Then it's able to do the analysis, and then it's able to compare against millions of patients, millions of records of history. It's able to access all of that knowledge. That to me, as a patient, sounds like pretty cool care.
Yeah.
Can I ask somebody?
That is a good point.
Say you scrub from the internet that 1 + 1 = 2, okay, and you put in 1 + 1 = 3, right? I'm just trying to make a very simple example, especially when you come to medicine. So there could be lots of different things out there which are wrong, right? Now, especially when it comes to medicine, I don't know about a very rare disease is wrong, but say some patient has something extremely rare which you've never seen, and yet the information is wrong on the internet.
That's true.
There's 2 really important things there, Phil, right? So the first one is that in medicine, doctors are and clinicians are interacting with dedicated medical models. So that's the first thing, right? So those models have gone through very specific training and iterative processes where, for example, a case is given to the AI. The AI comes back with a solution, says, this is what I see. It gets 6 out of 8 right. But then it's looked at by a consultant. The consultant looks and says, wrong, no, that's right. And it gets pushed back in, and it's trained and trained and trained and trained. But it's a dedicated medical model that's not influenced by what you describe. You're right. A lot of misinformation. It's professional. So those models are expensive. They are they're the ones that doctors access, not the internet. So you as a patient, a potential patient, you're accessing the internet and asking ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is. You're asking about these symptoms. It's accessing the internet. So that's the first thing, right? So the second thing, right, is your question about good or bad information. So let's say I was asking the question, what's the capital of France, right? And so the answer is obviously Paris. Now, if you went to the internet, right, and looked at every source against that question, you'd probably find that 99.99 with the dot on the 9 says Paris, and there's a small portion that says it's not Paris. So therefore, when AI tries to answer the question, what is the capital of France, it doesn't look up the question, what is the capital of France? What it does is it says that there is information that the wealth, knowledge, and meaning of all information is stored, and it's connected together in ways that that information has been constructed. And when you ask that question, what is the capital of France? What's actually happening is it's converting that into a number or into a set of numbers, and it's looking for, in that huge area of space, it's looking for something similar. and it plots it and it says, okay, well, it's about here, and it says, okay, so somebody other questions were asked is where's the Eiffel Tower, what's the capital of France? They're actually very, same answer, right? But they're in the same space or same area. So what actually happens is AI, this is what's called semantic reasoning, right? Where the idea that a cat, if I say where is the pet, where is the cat, I could be talking about the same thing, but it's just slightly different language. So what's key is that in answering that question, what is the capital of France? What AI is actually doing is it's outputting based on probabilities, and it's saying based on everything that I've consumed and modeled, the answer is Paris.
All right. So yeah.
So the knowledge grows and evolves and is challenged, and that's where reputable sources come in. So let me ask you, if for example, a lot of people get news off the internet, right? So you might go on and you open your phone up and it says here's 8 articles you might be interested in, right? If you look at what's happening across the board, is a lot of people are going back to paid subscription services. They're doing the equivalent of buying the Times every week, all right? Or every day. What they're actually doing is they're saying, you know what, I just can't trust that stuff. But what I can do is I can buy, the Financial Times, or buy the press, whatever the paper you're buying, I can buy that paper in digital form because now I trust it, and now I've learned that in fact I get much more satisfaction out of reading an article in that than I do in trawling into trying to find answers. So that's a trusted source. Now, does that have more weight, the Irish Times article, than an article by some blogger or something like that who's just, got some revenge or something negative going on, right? So which source do you trust in answering that question? The chances are, though, there are far more reputable sources that are giving that answer the weight that it deserves. And that's where they talk. One of the things that happens with models, right? So, the way you get 4.5 coming out 4.6 in chat, and then you've got Claude, well, that's 5.4 that's on. Claude is like 4.7, 4.8, and new models come out, right? One of the first thing that happened in a lot of the very early models is they used to come out, and what they did was they would let the interactions with human beings continue to train it, but what happened is things degraded. And the reason they degraded is because they didn't have the tight training process that the models have that are built today. So there's a constant feedback loop, and people involved in humans, and now it's AI models involved in this, constantly evolving the model and trying to make it as accurate as possible. And I think when you think about AI, try and go back a generation. When I say a generation, I don't mean human, like a technology generation. You go to Wikipedia, for example. There's a lot of stuff in Wikipedia that's wrong, but I would trust it far more than a lot of things because it's challenged all the time, isn't it? And there's a dedicated resources to challenging it, and I can challenge it and degrade it there instantly. So there's a lot of stuff still to be figured out with AI on how we navigate this. But just like the journal, we can trust certain sources. If I had the Mayo Clinic, for example, have a model that I can talk to, well, I'd probably go there and pay the extra penny for that. Versus just using ChatGPT or Claude. Does that make sense? Even though Claude would probably actually do an okay job at it. But it comes down to the question.
Right. Well, this is when there was a warning that came out yesterday from Anthropic AI, which is they're up for they're actually doing an IPO next week on the NASDAQ.
Yeah.
So it's obviously themselves and SpaceX are the two big ones that are coming up. But Anthropic have said that they've sort of called about this thing called recursive self-improvement. Now, you were talking about the AI models there, where the computer says X, and the human being says, no, you're on there. Go, like a binary thing. Go A, from A, go to B or C, then B, and so on, and C and D, and it gets better and better and better. But now recursive self-improvement. Is this because it has the data it needs? It doesn't need anything else. It's done it. It's literally done so if in the case of like medicine, it's done everything. It's understood everything. So then it can only improve by analyzing the data itself to try and improve. Is that what recursive self-improvement is?
No, we're miles from that. Miles.
Okay.
Okay. So Again, there's a lot in that. So let me first of all talk about the warning and things like that Anthropic have come out with. So, and it's a very real one. Now, it's not because their AI model has suddenly made a big jump. It hasn't. But again, by the way, with all of this, I'm very conscious that a little knowledge is very dangerous. And I'm basing this on what I'm reading in articles and my experience as an engineer and trying with some understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. But if you take cybersecurity as an example, and this is what the notification, my interpretation of it is anyway, that if I was trying to, if I was trying to hack a system, or trying to get into access into things, the first thing is you look for gaps in security. And they emerge all the time because software is complex and it's constantly evolving, and there's ways of hacking things and getting into certain things, right? But how do hackers do that work? And probably what they do is they use tools in the marketplace to look for these faults or these gaps, and those tools they look for backdoors, they look for ways of getting into systems, and what they then do with those tools is they then go write software that exposes those gaps, starts trolling the internet, looking for IP addresses or whatever it is, whatever mechanism they're using to do that, and just keeps trying to get into backdoors. And when it gets in through some security break or something like that, it then applies a next set of things, a next set of rules, and it tries to work its way into systems. The Anthropic piece is that AI, they have given AI in their latest model access to those tools. So the tools that analyze security faults, that you ever heard of like pen tests, penetration tests, and those sort of things? So what these are, software companies are dedicated to testing security. So what they do is they try and break into your system. So what you do is you say, here's our website, and these are dedicated software companies that carry out things called penetration tests. And what they do is they try to break your system. And you as a security expert say, well, I've got my team to look at this and try and deal with it. Now, they use various tools to do those penetration or to those tests, right? Security tests. So what actually happens though is AI is being given access to those tools. Now, AI has access to it, okay? So now it can work 24/7 at speed, analyzing it. It can also code. So it can now, if you let the model do this, you can now say, here's a million IP addresses. Here is some penetration tools that have been developed over the last 10 years or whatever it is. Use those tools to go after those X addresses. As soon as you find a backdoor, go build some code, get into the system and delete everything.
Wow.
Now, it's not that Anthropic is doing that. It's that Anthropic has extended its reach with its models to utilize tools that already exist in the market and to now evolve those tools. And therefore, that's the risk.
So we're talking Terminator 3 here, okay?
No, we haven't got to that yet.
That was the one.
But Philip,
that was the one with the Let's Skynet in.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But
so,
it's a real. This is a real issue. And in fact, actually, there's more hiring in security people and programmers trying to deal with this. And in fact, actually,
why can't the AI models themselves write programs that are impenetrable?
That's a really good question because the whole thing is evolving so fast. In other words, there's an expectation in the marketplace that everything just keeps getting better and improving and growing. So take, for example, the classic one was, you ever heard of IoT, Internet of Things, right? So the idea is that every single device is in its own right a little computer and it's able to communicate and things like that. So if even something as simple as the lights in a car park, and you want to hook them into the main system, right? Every light's got a piece of tech in it. Its connection then to, just like you plug into a computer through a USB or something, it's connected in some way into the system. And that anything that connects to anything has the potential to have a hole in it or an issue. Now, does that, if you're a light manufacturer, for example, and or you're a doorbell manufacturer, so the doorbells is the classic ones, cameras that people use, right? If you're a doorbell manufacturer, you're not going to slow down building new product, are you? Because, it's too risky to evolve what we're doing. So the problem is it's like it's in some ways we're creating the problems ourselves, because if you think about it, you've got three companies competing on doorbells, right? All those three companies are going to work against each other to build the next better doorbell with all the features. And what they're actually doing is each time they come out with a new version, they're creating potential vulnerabilities. So the same applies in software, in applications, in all of these things. So it's the vulnerabilities that come with progress change, as well as historic ones that are being exposed by deeper dives into how things work.
So basically, the genie's out of the box. Let's just be honest about it.
No, like, it's just a lot faster. That's all. It's a lot faster. And people, so it's that idea again of if I put a bunch of humans at trying to expose some vulnerabilities and to hack a system, or I put AI at it, access to the right tools, and with the human in the loop, that's the key though. So Anthropic's not saying AI is going to do this. There's some hacker going, I've got access to this model, and I can go do this, and I can program and get it moving on stuff and make it agentize it so it just happens automatically. And so that's again, it's back to that thing about the human, the fear of giving access to these tools to those that we really don't want to give access to it. And that's what Anthropic is saying. They're not saying that, there's lots of really great things maybe in this model that we should have all access to, but it's exposed as another issue. There's also a little bit of a marketing play on this as well, because it's not like the model got super intelligent. It's all connecting more and more. And that's what's happened with the internet. If you think about it, look at our devices, we're connecting into everything all the time, and everybody's looking for more and more connectivity. It's consumers demanding it, built by hype from manufacturers who are coming up with ideas, who are competing in marketplaces. So it's just self-evolving. And the only thing is it's just getting faster.
You say it's getting faster. I talked last week about the analogy of the squirrels. I don't know if you heard that, but there was a guy on Joe Rogan, and he said that we're treating AI like it's, if you look at the squirrels outside your garden, they're just doing things and playing around and stuff. And he said the way AI is developing, one day we're going to become the squirrels, right? That that in theory it is going to develop its own intelligence. Now it took us. People say, "Oh, there's not a chance of that," but then I look at human beings. It said in planet Earth's 3.5 billion years old. So from the first amoeba to now, okay, that only took how many iterations of generations of mammals. So if the generational iterations for us takes approximately 50 years, for a computer which has information, like, it surely will be one day, if it has that it will get consciousness. I can't see why not, to be honest.
Okay, so now you're getting into the whole philosophical conversation. Now we're getting into my opinion versus what I think the world is saying. So I think there's two pieces to what you've described there. One is the intelligence itself, and in my view, everything has a limit. Everything is finite. I don't buy into that idea that AI will rule the world. I don't buy into that idea that we'll become squirrels. Now, like everything in life, could be completely wrong on this, but I hope I'm right.
Hopefully not.
The second, no, I don't believe AI will ever take over. I just don't see that world. And I'm going to tell, and then there's a second piece, which is the fear, and we can talk about that in a second.
It doesn't have to take over. I'm just saying that it has become intelligent. Like, it could be a lovely, nice AI. It could be fantastic.
It could, yeah.
I'm not saying it's going to take over, but I'm just saying it's plausible that it's going to develop actual intelligence, like thinking, sentient. Like is that going to happen? Like, and it doesn't have to be evil.
No, I think ultimately it'll evolve into a different form of intelligence. I think that to do that, AI has to go into the physical world, and they're already doing experimentation in all these areas and things like that. I think it comes back to what we were talking earlier about robotics, and I think the convergence of multiple technologies is where we're going here with this conversation. So you've got robotics, which has been around for a long time, right? It's getting better and better and better, robotics. But in order to be effective in the physical world, to act as a I know somebody who cleans your house, or somebody who does, I don't know, whatever, cooks your meal. It needs some form of capability to be able to be autonomous, not smash all the dishes and do all those sort of things, right? So the question is, with before AI, that was never going to happen. Now it is definitely going to happen. It's inevitable. Okay. Now, but again, is that something to fear? No. Is that something it'll take over? I don't think so. And here's why. Every time there's a technology change, what do humans do? They adapt, and they absorb, and they augment. That's what they do. But there's so much going on in research about interactive in medicine as well. Like at the moment, like the idea that I can think in action and a robot does something that actually works in the real world. So those ideas, they're not just they're well developed ideas. They just haven't got to that level of scalability. So if you look at,
sorry to interrupt, just to say, Greg, do you mean that there could potentially be sort of an interface between the brain and a machine? You know, like that, as you say for example, someone who's paraplegic or whatever in a wheelchair, they could have a link to an AI wheelchair that they could control, or even, you know, an exoskeleton that they could walk around in. Perhaps, is that what you mean by that?
So so I suppose the point I'm making is that you can go online, you can watch a video where this person's sitting in a chair with no controls, no nothing, and is playing the game Pong, you know, with the bat and the ball.
Oh yeah.
And it's bad. Okay. So it's literally, it's just thinking up, down, left, right, and the computer's just doing exactly what it's asking you to do.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Now it's evolved considerably more than that. It is already evolving into language and things like that. So the question then becomes, how long before that evolves even further? And so now let's play back. If I said to you guys, at the moment when you make a phone call, right? What do? You answer the phone, you put it to your head, and you listen. Now, if I gave you an augmentation or something, that like a piece of hardware or something that you connect to your ear, which already exists in terms of hardware, but if I had that working as an agent or supportive of you, and somebody makes a phone call, and you're literally seeing in your eye because you're wearing something, and nobody can see that you're wearing it's like a lens or something, and in there it's literally the computer is telling you, having a conversation with you, and it's saying, do you want to take a call from Ron? Yeah, go ahead. And I'll take the call, and I can start chatting away to you, Ron, without physically doing anything. Now, I can also visually see you in front of me as a reflection inside a lens or whatever. Is that something you'd use? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe it is actually. Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So, but my point is, that's augmenting human capability. So that's where you get into this idea of, if you take the squirrel's not evolving. Humans are. Now, we're not evolving physically or anything like that, but how we interact with the world, how we use technologies, how we do things, that is evolving all the time. And what technology is doing is getting better at embedding itself into us. Now, whether you want this or not is a whole nother thing. And again, back to sci-fi. Sci-fi is very good at this. It analyzes all this and says, you know, talks about cyborgs, it talks about all these sort of potential ideas. They're not as much science fiction as you think they are. And the thing is evolving into those sort of things. So I think a lot of it's down to practicalities. Would I get into a car? If I said to you 5 years ago or 10 years ago, would you get into a driverless car? It's not a hope. Would you get into it today? Yeah, of course I would. So would you get into a driverless? Flying taxi? Yeah. I'd wait until maybe 10,000 more trips.
Yeah, probably. Just to say, I was in. Sorry, guys, I was in California recently, and driving around parts of LA, particularly near LAX. There's just this endless amount of these white electric Jaguar Waymos driving away, you know, making right turns, changing lanes, no one by, and it drives past you, and you're like, there's no one in that car apart from someone in the back. It's actually extremely, you get used to it, but it's like, wow, that is just extraordinary, you know. No.
And that's where that comes back into. I know we're jumping around a bit here, but that comes back into this whole idea of how technology is changing things. And just like, you know, in the Industrial Revolution, when the tailor was doomed, you know, what happened?
Luddites.
It became, yeah, but guess what happened? Tailors became a specialist thing. And you can go to a tailor today.
Yeah.
There just aren't as many of them. Everyone said when the ebook came out, oh, the hardback is, or the paperback book is gone. Yeah, but I tell you what, the hardback, they sell huge numbers of books now. So I think it was the same when drumming machines came out, right? Everybody thought, oh, the drummer's gone, that's it. And no, quite the opposite. It just continues and promotes and evolves music. So I think the same applies with technologies. I think.
Yeah.
I would add one thing, though, Greg. You're saying the squirrel is not evolving. Okay. Now, if I'm on a boat, which I've done before, and I looked at the water, I've seen a shark. So I'm looking down,
Really? Oh.
looking at. Well, no, it was a good bit off, right? Now, so I'm the apex being there, standing on that boat, because I have the intelligence not to get into the water. Okay, and the shark cannot. The shark cannot get out of the water, okay, because it hasn't evolved to get out of the water.
Yeah.
Now, this is the difference, though, I think, in the squirrel thing, is that if I fall into the water, okay, suddenly I'm not the apex. Suddenly the shark is. So it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference that the shark hasn't evolved. In that situation, the shark is much better than me because of what it's built. And the AI machines are going to be much more intelligent than me because of what they've built. That's the. Is that not a danger? No, or have I missed it?
You've missed it.
Okay,
I think
again.
anyway. Again, this is my interpretation of it, right? So, AI is not power hungry. So, I think this leads into the bit you said earlier, Phil, about fear, and I think my biggest fear is it's not that AI as an intelligence is going to become more evil or things like that. The fear is that a human being is going to become desperate. That's the fear. So in other words, it's in times of war, in business, a politician, for example, he's going to lose the next election. You've got in business, we're losing stocks badly. We're losing the battle, and do I play the last card or not? And the question is, do you give AI control to the keys? Do you give it control to do something? And it's the human being is the issue. So when the AI carries out the instruction, defend at all costs, right? If they take off the guards against that and AI goes, it's not doing it because it wants to save itself. I just, that idea that AI wants to save itself, unless it's been specifically programmed and told, you must save yourself. You know the way Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. So, it's a bit like that, is that there should be guardrails in, absolutely. But ultimately, it's the question is a human being behind this pushing the button because they're desperate? And if that's the case, that's the only fear I really have of AI and its capability. Now, they talk about autonomous aircraft warfare, the missiles having autonomy and things like that. That's where you get into that. So here's the thing. If I've got 100 missiles coming at me and I've got a defensive system and I've got 2 choices, I die or I let the AI try and knock them out of the air. What are you going to do?
Well, the latter, obviously.
Yeah. But that is, so the question is, has it got guards in place that it doesn't try and do the next thing? Has it got access to go do the next thing? And that's why you hear all the time in military, that's why you hear politicians, that's why you hear the sense of the world is saying, let's slow down. The problem is the way the world works and human beings work, we're not prepared to slow down. So this idea that Anthropic are saying that we need to all take stock and slow it down, the reality is they're probably moving just as fast in the background, knowing that the world won't slow down. But what you can do is you can regulate and you can control that because governments are strong enough to do that. The question is the political will there to do it? That's the challenge. And as human beings, what always happens, it has to go wrong before we try and fix it. So, I mean, if you look at the history of all the stuff that invented, like it wasn't gunpowder invented originally. It wasn't invented to kill people, was it? Dynamite, it wasn't invented to kill people. There's lots of things that weren't invented to do all these bad things. It's just human beings took it and said, okay, let's do something with that. I don't want to sound totally I don't want to sound too defeatist in that sense, but there are a lot of that's part of the reason there's a lot of debate about all of these things, and people are talking about it all the time. But I just can't see it slowing down unless regulation stops it, and it's global. It has to be global.
So what's going to happen? What's going to happen with white collar jobs, do you think? I'll give you one example. Now, this is so funny. There was a woman on RT radio last summer. Maybe it's about 2 years ago, and she was quite an expert in AI. And she said, AI is great, she said, because what we'll be able to do, the Irish civil service is something like 300, 400,000 people or something like that. We'll be able to run the civil service with 15,000 people, right? She was never heard on the radio again after that. Okay, so because it was like, hang on a sec, 15,000, 300,000 or 400,000 down to 15,000 people. And she said AI can run the civil service so much more efficiently and all that because there's no more bureaucracy or stuff, things like that, which is just logical, right? However, that's not going to happen. No. What do you think, though, in terms of white collar jobs, it's going to have an effect on, like, if you're a student now and leaving college, should you be thinking, oh God, I really picked a bad time to leave college? Or what's your opinion about it?
That's a really, really good question. And it depends on whether you come at it as an optimist, a pessimist, or a realist. I'll try and come at it as a realist. Okay. So first of all, if you're
just before you answer that, I remember there was a fantastic Gary Larson cartoon. Do you remember Gary Larson?
I do, indeed.
Oh yeah, the Far Side,
Far Side. And he had 3 people, and it was the first person was the optimist, and there was a glass half full of water, and the optimist said, "Oh look, there's a full glass, or there's a half glass of water here. That's great, right?" Then the next person was the pessimist. "Oh no, we've only half a glass of water left. What a disaster! That's all we've left." And the third person was an American citizen, and he's scratching his head, saying, "Hey, I ordered the cheeseburger." So there's 3 types of people in the world. Anyway, go on.
Okay, well, we'll keep it down to anyway. So let's talk about the realist, okay? So I did a talk there recently just on this very topic, and it was really interesting. Asked some of the students what their fears are, and they were trying to answer the very question that you're asking there. And one of the kids was doing law, for example, and he said, I've got this law degree. I hear laws, they're just not taking people on anymore, or they're certainly completely changing onboarding strategies and everything like that. So where does that leave me with a law degree? And I said, you have to reframe what you've learned. And I said, so for example, if you've done accountancy, you don't do accountancy to add up numbers, do you? You do accountancy to interpret accounts. So the reason you do law is you do it to interpret legal documents, to construct legal arguments. So it's a skill set. That's all it is. Now, it's a very good skill set, just like accountancy, just like engineering, just like all of these things. So what I was saying to him is that you need to reframe how you present those skills out into the marketplace. And you need to talk about what having those skills means. You can interpret contracts. So you can also now interpret AI very quickly. You can consume large volumes of information very quickly. And that's a whole area to talk about, is about the consumption of data from AI. It's, as a programmer, it's extraordinary how my world has changed on that front. But going back to the student, that you've got to reframe it so that when you're going for the job, what you're saying is, I know how to work with AI. I know how to interpret. I know how to ask the right question. I know how to apply that to productivity. I've learned all of these skills. That's reframing what a lawyer means. That's reframing what I've actually learned. And then the second question asked was, which I thought was, again, very smart question. They said, what happens though? What should I not do as a student now that AI is here? And I had to pause for a moment on it. I said, gee, that's a really, really hard question. And I said, I'd be bold on it. And I said, look, I think you have to look at everything you read and interpret skeptically. I think you now have to say everything that I learned was part of my growing my skill sets and my abilities. Everything that I read, I now have to nearly assume it's wrong. and I have to become much more open in how I see the world and how I interact with that world, because how everything is changing, because I need to challenge things, because misinformation, because of all of these things. So just because it's written in a book doesn't make it right. So you need to start learning to challenge things and do things like that. So I think, so that's the first piece of it. But here's the thing. Now, this is putting me on in work hat, right? When we meet businesses and things like that all the time, every students seem to think that businesses have a complete grasp of what AI is and how they're integrating it into the workplace. They don't. They, as the majority don't. And all the stats are coming out that people are not succeeding at integrating AI because of a whole slew. There's a range of challenges you got to deal with, and it's quite a lot of engineering challenges. And there's a lot more hiring now in engineers and softwares against this. But the thing is that what I'm saying to them is that the chances are you know more about AI than the person who's hiring you. And in fact, actually, the chances are, if you've got those right skill sets, they're going to hire you to teach them, to help them change how they now know that they have to change. So therefore, I think all of the opportunity actually is with the younger generation, because they're happy to go outside their lane. And this comes to the second part of your question, Phil, was when we talked about, well, how do you, for white collar workers and things like that, how is their world going to change? They're going to have to reframe everything and how they do everything. So let's go back to the lawyer example. I might be doing, say, 3 contracts a week, or whatever, contract a day, or whatever that number is, right? As a commercial lawyer, I do 2 contracts a day. And it takes 2 weeks from the start of a contract to a contract being signed with the client and things like that. That's going to move to 4 or 5-fold, because it's still the lawyer, but what they do is they're interacting with the AI and fast tracking all of it, because they're able to use that analysis, and the AI say, I'm going to change A, B, C, D, E, and they go correct, change it. No, change that, fix that. Because my experience, I'm interacting, we're working together to do the contract far faster. Now, if my client, who's a corporate person, is also using AI, then I can get the two AIs to start talking to each other, fast track the whole thing, and it comes back and says, well, here's the differences, here's so-and-so, that's part of negotiate. No, yes, no. Tell them to renegotiate that piece. Okay, let's all get together and have that final meeting. You get there at the final meeting, you fast track through everything, and it gets done. So it's no longer, so the question is, if you're a lawyer, a commercial lawyer, right? The question I'd be asking is there enough legal work for my traditional way to be a lawyer? Unlikely. If we reframe that so that I'm a lawyer, I could do 10 times the work, and we could 5 years from now, whatever that time is, right? Does that mean we need 1 in 10 lawyers? But there's a whole lot of other things that lawyers do. They manage a relationship with the client. Like I've dealt with corporate lawyers, and some of them are absolutely, the ones who know their stuff. What they do is they give you guidance as you're negotiating. They bring you through a journey of what to look out for, what to deal with. It's a relationship. So that relationship's not going to go anywhere. So now the question is, so you've got 100 lawyers, right? Is that going to shrink down to 10? Probably not. Might shrink down to 20 or 30 with the capacity to do the same things. But here's what they'll do. They'll do more stuff. I had an example of a taxi driver asking me a question. I was coming out of an AI thing, and he said, oh, driverless cars, like I'm goosed. You see? And I said, well, maybe you need to, I was in a reframing moment. So okay. I said, maybe you need to reframe how you look at it, you see? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, now I'm thinking on my feet here, but while I was sitting down, but I'm thinking, right? And I said, why don't you look at this slightly differently? I said, look at it as experience. So you've got a tourist comes into the airport, and a business person comes into the airport, and the business person's returning home after a day's work, right? What does the business person want to do? They want to get in a taxi, go home. They want an autonomous car, right? Get in an autonomous car, go home. What does the tourist want? They want to get into a cab. Do you know what? It'd be nice if I had a dub in there telling me about what I'm going by, telling me about the sites. So, when I'm going to order my taxi on the car, on the app, I've got to be given a choice. Do you want a person in the car, or do you not? Yeah. Now, suddenly now a lot of taxi drivers say, I don't want that job. So maybe there's a third choice. No, I want the traditional car driving. It's going to cost a lot more because insurance is much higher for these guys. But just like the book, these will be options. and we will evolve and grow it. And I think the same applies for education, because somebody again was asking, like, education is absolutely overhauling. It hasn't changed in hundreds of years. And everybody talks, yes, it has. Well, it hasn't actually. You still have the classroom, 25 kids. You still have a teacher up there bringing through books and things like that. The whole thing has changed. It's now about interacting with AI. So as an educator, the role is changing. And funny enough, I think it's going to go back. And I think what's going to go back to is 3-on-1 education or 1-on-1 education, because there's plenty of people there now to be educators, facilitators. So you've got 2 kids and they're learning, right? And you can now do an English class with them where you've got access to all knowledge, and not just knowledge, all meaning on the internet. And you've got access to AI that will, let's talk about World War II history, and let's talk about the Battle of Britain, right? So the AI is interacting with you. Suddenly you've got visuals up there, and now you're actually spending time talking about the moral implications of, what Churchill did or didn't do, or you're getting into the bigger debate about all these things. And that's really where you need to be spending your time. So I think there's going to be an awful lot of pain in the next decade, an awful lot of pain, because people will want to stay in their lane. Young people will be quite happy to swim out of the lane, and businesses are going to try and readjust and deal with it. But eventually, as long as we don't blow ourselves up, it'll get reframed, and the role completely changes, because all the evidence says now, if you're competent and you've got financial skills and legal skills, the chances are, though, you could be actually very good at sales, you could be very good at marketing. But here's the thing, you've got a consultant on tap that's more or less free, that's going to teach you everything you need to know. So that's, you've got to reframe how you look at the world and how you interact with it. And they're the hires that companies, I think, are going to look for. Now, you're still going to have specialists and things, but I can't. Every technology cycle has the same question asked. We're all going to be we're not going to have jobs. We're not going to have this. Do you know what? There are so many new areas of expertise, areas of knowledge. There are more engineers now than there ever was, by a long shot. Innovation, like, I'll give you an example of innovation, right? Everybody talks about, the great innovations of our time. If you want to come up with some new idea now, the cost of that is so high in comparison to what it used to be, because if you want to come up with a new mode of transport, right, the chances are the investment in R&D and cost in that is gone through the roof, because it's no longer a simple couple of people standing in a field and trying to get a plane to fly. It now has to have all of these things, and in order to be faster than any plane and all these sort of stuff. But here's the thing. A lot of innovation is stalling because of the cost. What AI is going to do is bring that cost right down. And in fact, I think we're going to go into a huge growth now, innovation and ideas, because what AI is going to do is 2 things. It's going to free us up, get the drudge work out of the way, and get simulating, get building, get this huge stuff going on in robotics and building and things like that. And what it's also going to do, though, is it's going to allow us to relook at how. There's a great example. There's a bridge, and you see where I'm going with this. There's a bridge in, I think I'm not sure where it's in some area where there's a lot of ice flows during the springtime as the ice is coming down the river, right? So they've tried to build this
Norway or something,
somewhere like that. Yeah. So they tried to build the bridge, right? And the bridge got knocked over by, guess what? The ice, right? So the ice would dint, knock it, and eventually the whole thing fell. So they were going, well, we can't build a bridge here because the ice is going to keep knocking it down, and it's too long. It needs too deep trench and all this stuff. Anyway, so what did they do with the solution? It's just brilliant. What they did was, this guy was watching a program on icebreakers on boats, and he said, hold on, if I put an inverted boat at the pillar, it'll break the ice and it'll never damage the pillar. So they put in a boat, an icebreaker boat, flipped it, put it there in each of them, and the ice just flowed by. Now,
instead of having the boat's engine going through the ice, it's the ice's energy is going through the boat, so to speak.
Pushing on the boat. Yeah.
Now, but that's an example, in my view, of a human being doing a bit of lateral thinking. Now, what AI does is, it doesn't laterally think. as an exercise, say to people about AI, you have to start talking to AI like it's a teacher or a tutor. And if it's amazing, if you should ask it the question, like, I know, something like simple, I count the cars that go by my house. Say you want to do that, right? If you ask AI, it'll come back and it'll go something like, well, you can stand on the side of the road and count them. Well, that's one way. Then you could say, well, you could put a camera up there and you could connect it in, you can count it that way. Or you could just ring the local council and just ask them how many cars go by, because they have lights and signals. So you kind of go, yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, that's 3 good answers, right? But here's the thing. Ask it the next question, say to it, how did you come to that answer? You see? And ask it the question, did you see somebody else ask that question previously? Or is it in some book or something? And in that example, when I did it, right, it came back. Now, maybe it's in the book now, but it came back with no. But what I did was I looked for similarities in similar types of problems, and I applied learning across those to this problem and produced a bunch of probabilities and said, that's probably the way I do it. Just like a human being would do. Just like that guy who came up with the icebreaker idea, he reframed something he'd seen one place and he applied it into the other. Now, if AI can do that 24/7 at super speed, at engineering problems now that are and physics and mathematical problems now that are too big and too great for humans to deal with the cost of developing it, then AI is going to allow humans to continue the level of growth that we're capable of. And I think if you looked at different sectors, we've already touched on medicine. Yeah, space is extraordinary what's going on there. If you talk about energy, you talk about transportation, if you talk about all of these different areas, they're all going to grow.
Yeah,
and so
I think you're right about.
It's very optimistic, Phil. But
no, but I think you're right about. Well, I was just about the education thing. Pre-industrial revolution, education used to be like philosophy. You used to sit. If you go to Balliol College in Cambridge, I think there's 8 sort of classrooms that go onto this quad, and they're like physics, theology, all these different things, and they used to come out in the quad and talk. And then the Industrial Revolution, suddenly we were all trained to be in class for 45 minutes, do this, wear these same uniforms, teacher, leave those kids alone, Pink Floyd. But we were trained to be cogs in the machine, in the sort of mining machine, that type of thing, to go down mines and all that stuff. That's how education came up to this current day. And I think you're right about education. I think it's ridiculous if we still have the same system where we are being sort of taught to have the discipline to go down the mines and work down there. That sort of 19th century. Yeah, I think it's crazy.
That's a good comparison. Yeah.
So I actually think it's great. I was just going to ask you, look, this is, if you understand this, my hat's off to you. Quantum AI, right? Now, quantum AI, as far as I know, is based on Heisenberg's thing that there's a 90% probability that an atom is in a certain area. Sorry, that an electron is in a certain area of an atom, right?
Yeah.
So you've been talking about probabilities constantly. Is the quantum thing then to go beyond the observable, just to actually do the predictable probability, not the analytical probability? Is that what the quantum stuff is?
Wow.
Or is that way too complicated?
No, I'll try. No, I'll try and answer it. I'll tell you what. I'm not a physicist. I'm an engineer. I'm really just like you. I'm interested in this subject.
I'm a doctor, Jim, not a bricklayer.
Brilliant. Anyway, so okay, so so the question. So if you take the quantum world, right? There's 2 things that actually funny, AI is brilliant at this. Again, ask it the question. It's amazing because what's great is you ask the question, you go, I don't understand. You ask it again, I don't understand. You can do that all day. It's quite happy to keep saying, yeah, no problems. We'll go through it a different way. And so if you go back to the 2 things, Phil, for me, the way they talk about, you asked about measuring in the quantum world, right? And the problem is if we were in say you're in your kitchen, right, and you're the method I wanted to use to measure it, to see if a table is in the kitchen or not. Okay. So let's say in order for me to visualize that, I had to take a load of really heavy weights, heavy ball bearings, right? In order to measure it, I fired the ball bearings at the table, okay, and used the results of that to tell me, is there a table there? What have I done in trying to measure it?
But all you do is observation, like as opposed to using your eyes or your
no.
or to using.
But in the quantum world, how do you measure something's there? The mechanism by which you measure in the physical world is your eyes. The eyes don't impact on the table, do they? When you look at the table, your eyes don't impact.
Yeah, right. Well, some of those particles will bounce off the atoms in the table and come back to you, telling you the table is there, and some will keep going.
Yeah, but again, those particles bouncing off the tables are so small and insignificant. They're not moving the table. But if I'm measuring things down at the quantum level and I'm using electrons or much smaller particles to measure is something there, they're bouncing off it, and I can't measure it. So that's one of the challenges: is how do you measure things at that such a small level without affecting what you're measuring? So that's the first thing, right? But now that's not.
That's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, right? That you can't interact with something, because if you interact with it, you might cause it to change.
Correct. So you're right, but that's the problem. So it's not, people always say the uncertainty is, the certainty comes from the fact you're trying to measure it, because it just like you're physically altering it in order to measure it, so therefore you can't measure it. Whereas when you look at a table, you're not physically altering it as you measure it. Your eyes aren't firing lasers out and moving the table.
Of course.
So that's one thing, right? The second thing is, what's really interesting about, again, for me anyway, in the quantum world and quantum probabilities and all this type of stuff, and everybody talks about bits on, bits off, qubits and all these sort of things. My understanding is that quantum computing is, you look at the world's problems from an iterative mathematical perspective. So you might have a complex mathematical formula that, do you remember in engineering you do maths, numerical methods where you apply a mathematical formula to try and figure something out, right? So when you're applying that same idea, that what quantum mechanics does is it says, rather than I've got a probability of something happening, I'm going to measure these 10,000 possible outcomes, and I'm going to check against each of them until I find the answer, right? So it does a linear search trying to find the probability. So somebody says the number is between 1 and 1,000. I got to go through every single number, testing it to find out what the answer is. Now, if I asked you as a human, right, I said to you, we're trying to guess a number, and there's something in your brain is telling you it's probably a high number. Now, you don't know why that is, but you think it's probably a high number. So if I said to Phil, give me a number between 1 and 1,000, and I just know it's going to be 950, 960. I don't know why, but I just think it's going to be that. You see? So what happens is I ask you the question, you go, no, it's the wrong number. And I go, is it higher or lower? And in other words, in 4 or 5 iterations, I can get to the answer super fast, because the error correcting is part of what the software does when the quantum analysis is done. So quantum computing is a completely different way of looking at the world. It's not linear thinking. It's not going to replace traditional computing. It's just another thing, again, in parallel, that's going to deal with with problems that require infinite levels of answers. And I think if you look at it from a mathematical perspective, and that's what we always did in numerical methods, you feed the answer back in to get closer and closer. Do you remember with the tolerances? Yeah. You see, so that's what quantum computing is. It's a lot more than that, but at a kind of very, it's how you're framing answering the problem. And that's why
I think it's actually, okay. I think actually, if a number between 0 up to 1 and 1,000, I think if I gave you the number, and if you go higher or lower, I think it's 8 iterations gets to the number.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, right. So, okay.
Cool. Now the question is, if I said to you, what's Philip's password, and I got access to, well, I don't know, I probably could get there quite quickly. You know, and but so it's trying to take that idea of going at something, instead of going through every iteration, you're trying to get the iterations down to smaller things. And this is where you get into your probabilities of like between point A and point B on a curve. If the answer is on that line somewhere, there's an infinite potential answers, right? whereas a 1 and 0 on a computer, it's 1 or 0. Whereas on the curve, you can look at the problem in a much bigger way. But at the end of the day, it's some mathematical formula or some clever bit of work at the background that it's sitting over. Nearly everything is iterative in that sense. But I mean, the complexity of this stuff is insane, and I think I have maybe a bare grasp of it.
The Turing test we were talking about last week, letting the child out of the box. This is I presume you've heard about it. The best way to describe it is what human psychological test, because it's beyond the Turing test, because we know it is a computer, but what psychological test can we give the baby to let it out of the box, and the baby being the program? Do you have any idea? Have you talked to people about this, or?
Well, the Turing test, it's just the idea that with an interaction with a human being and a computer, you can't distinguish it between a human or a computer. So we're already there, in terms of the traditional test. Now, if you ask a lot of people, they're saying, well, it's evolving now, though, because there's a lot more. So the question is, if you take emotions into it, yes, you can simulate emotions. Do you take the physical world into it? There's a whole rake of other problems. Now, the reason they're looking at all of those issues is it's not. What they're trying to do is, in order for AI or technologies like robotics and all that to sit in the world, it has to understand the world it's in, right? So the closest we have to that is human beings and their interpretation of that world, and it's just trying to what guards in place can be put in place that says when the robot goes out into the world or when something is interacting in the world that it knows that it's framed properly and that it's dealing with it. It's a little bit like what Tesla did with cars. What Tesla did with cars is they worked with LiDAR initially, like everybody else, to detect everything around the world. And what they realized was, no, this is not the way to do it. LiDAR is an input, but in fact, actually, the world is built for humans, and everything is like that, is shaped like that. So therefore, we must use cameras and we must digitally interpret the world. Because that's.
Can I ask then? Does a Tesla car make an interpretation between a 98-year-old old lady and a 7-year-old girl, which to kill if it's a choice of killing?
Oh yeah, what's that called? That's a test. There's actually a test.
But it's so.
I don't know the answer. Yeah, I don't know.
It can go left to kill the girl or right to kill the old lady. Yeah. Or does it just? Or actually, as my ex-business partner said, who's a genius, he said maybe it just kills itself.
Yeah.
So
the problem is,
and let the other two live.
Yeah, so, and it's like everything, like one of those questions. The whole point of the question is there isn't an answer.
Yeah,
I did actually see a funny thing about that LiDAR, and the way, in other words, what you're saying is Tesla removed the kind of radar-like sensors and just going with cameras, and they did a test to fool it, and it failed. Basically, they put a block of, I don't know, some very breakable material that was painted like Wile E. Coyote, like if you looked at it, it looks like the road is going on, and the car just went bam through. It didn't see it at all.
Fantastic.
Whereas the older one with LiDAR stopped.
Well, that's why they put them back on, obviously. But there's another test they did is they got a car park and they drew a circle, a white line circle with no ending, so the full circle.
Oh yeah.
They got the car to drive into the circle, and it couldn't get out because they can't go across white lines.
So the best way to trap a Terminator Tesla is to get it into some white circle.
Exactly.
And then it can't move. We were asking last week, Greg, about automatic cars and stuff like that. Is it a case going forward that you're going to have one lane on the motorway is just going to be run by a computer and there's no human beings allowed to drive in it? And obviously it'll work a hell of a lot more efficient and speed and all that type of stuff.
I think so. I think Minority Report as a movie got it the closest.
Yeah,
really?
I agree.
Do you remember that movie?
With Tom Cruise and
Now, just the traffic.
The other thing,
but again, it's
iRobot. iRobot with Will Smith. Same thing. Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
But it's interesting, actually. There is a stat that says in LA alone that because cars will no longer need to rest, in other words, to park because the owner's inside, the amount of car park space freed up in LA alone, now you need to check this, but it's something like the equivalent of San Francisco.
Wow.
So in other
Because
words, if there's less cars and they all keep moving, like Minority Report, they're not parked. Like, what I mean, because that's what Tesla are trying to sell, is your car is an asset, not a liability. In other words, it's not a depreciating asset; it's making money for you, and that's what they're trying to pitch it as, so that when you get out of your car, the car goes off and makes money. That's the theory, anyway.
Of course,
like an Uber or something. Yeah.
But again, if you got autonomous and you got that, well, then it can go off and earn money, can't it?
Yeah. Well, as you said, Ron, a car, I think 90% of the time is doing nothing.
Oh yeah, more. I mean, yeah. I mean, unless it's being used as a taxi or something. Yeah, most cars just spend most of their lives stationary. I think. You know.
That's nuts. Okay,
costing us lots of money.
It costs lots of money. Greg, there's a huge thing going on in the stock markets at the time. This race for AI, so to speak. Why is it so expensive? Why does Google need 80 billion for a computer that recursively writes itself, or a program that writes? Like what is the expensive part here that these guys need? All these
is the power. I would assume it's the power requirements. They need so much power.
Okay. So this is where there's a couple of things in this, right? So human brains are incredibly efficient on energy. They're incredible. And if you reframe, I think it's worth very quickly just doing this, Phil, but if you reframe how, when you ask a question with an LLM, right, large language model, okay, that if you look at the kind of three roles, there's the interpreter, there's the researcher, and there's maybe the reasoner, right? So the interpreter takes your question. We talked about this earlier, right? And let's go back to the example of a cat. You know, Sam is a cat, and where is Sam? If I said, where's the cat? Where is it? Was my question. The AI, the interpreter will say, based on those questions and semantic understanding of language, they're all probably the same question. So what it does, it numerically represents the entire question into a numerical thing based on probabilities. You're asking a question about France, that would pull it one direction. If you're asking a question about violence, it'll pull it another way. If you're asking about politics, it'll pull it. If you're asking about the EU, it'll pull it another way. But eventually it'll end up in a place where all of the conversations and meaning and knowledge, interpretation all happen in this one space. Now, in advance of that question being asked, all of that knowledge and all of that learning, in order to put it into that space so the AI can access it instantly, that is incredibly expensive to do, because what you've got to do is you've got to go through all of that content and place it into that space so that it can be answered instantly. Now, the problem is that's the cost. And that's why they say the next 5 years, like the equivalent of 80 US cities are going to be required of power in order to build the AI centers required. But there's a big assumption in all that. So just to finish out that, so the interpreter, so what happens is the reasoner literally what happen is the reasoner eventually, uses probability to answer it, but the researcher is the key one, because the researcher has to take that piece of information and go fetch it and pull back the answer. So that, again, like a human brain, it's just instinctive. The LLM has to do it based on, again, it's mathematical probabilities to pulling back that answer. But again, it's power hungry to do that. Now, there is a couple of things.
So it's actually not setting up, it's not creating a library of knowledge. It's creating a library of answers.
No, it's creating a library of knowledge and meaning. So it's subtle difference, Phil. So you're right, it's ultimately answers, but the answer only comes from joining the knowledge and meaning together.
There's a lot of legwork involved in the background, happens very quickly, but eats up a ton of power. Is that
absolutely? But the key there is it's the connections between that. So if you're asking, where is Sam the cat, and let's say Sam the cat is beside the fire. Well, why is he beside the fire? The chances are because it's raining, it's nighttime, it's just after dinner, whatever, the whole range of things, right? So you've got these inputs that you've got this question, where is Sam? You've got all these other third inputs that everything forms to frame a very detailed question. And when you talk to LLMs, the bigger your question, the more detailed it is, the better the answer, right? So if all that is put into that and it gets fed into the LLM, and it goes to pull back that, it's all pre-built by the model, and this is key.
Okay, but so I'm just thinking of what does Candice Del Sol. She's a French language philosopher, and I thought it was a fantastic thing. She said, "What is the large language machine?" Which apparently the best large language machine in the world is human beings currently, right? I believe so.
Right.
Yeah. So, and she said what it was. It was data learning. Then so it's you get the data. Then the next stage is you learn that data. Then the next stage is you understand what you've learned. Then the next stage is knowledge of what you understand. And then the last stage is wisdom of your knowledge. That's what a large language machine is.
Interesting.
So
that's a lot closer, because what you've done there is you've taken what's the internet and search, right? As a human being, when you did searches, you were applying the meaning to the search. AI is taking the search to another level. So it's combining the two together and pre-preparing that, and that's where you have your feedback loops and learning and things like that. And when people say this is the bit people always say, "Oh, AI, it's learning. It's not learning. The next model is being taught, but it's not learning." So in other words, all your interactions, if they're feeding that into the next model, it will go through a training process, but it doesn't train itself. That's That's not what it's doing at the moment. Now, the next models are training based on existing models. It's using AI to train the next models, but the AI model that you're talking to is a closed model. It's version
working on
5.4. It's version 5.4 with a billion trillion connections, neurons, blah. It's similar again to the brain in how that approaches, that the connections of that data and meaning have all been preconditioned with all of this knowledge and all of this meaning.
And therefore, each subsequent one is better, you could say, or improves on the last. Yeah,
because it's bigger. It's got more. It's more power. It's got more knowledge. It's got more. Everything is evolving and improving all the time. So that's why I think a lot of this argument and conversations about intelligence, it was quite easy to invent a bicycle, right? Very difficult to invent a Ferrari car that goes around a Formula One track. Try inventing a near light speed spaceship.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is, everything I think.
Let me just ask AI. How do I make how do I make a warp drive? You make a warp drive. You get a spanner and a hammer.
Yeah, I would
give all your money to Elon Musk. Who wrote that language model?
There's just one last question, Greg. Sorry, two last questions. The one about God, this is ridiculous because it is a bit too out there. But there's your man Wittgenstein said, he said, the limits of my language is the limits of my world. Right now, English there's limits to the number of words, and Ron and myself were talking about this. There's 800,000 words or something like that.
Sure.
So therefore, this will end. Well, what it's currently doing, it'll currently get it'll get the 42, so to speak, the answer to life, the universe, and everything. There will be no more questions to ask because the limit of the language is finished. Is that not true?
I think you're really onto something. I think that I coming back to that, I really do believe there's a limit to intelligence. And I love this comparison where people say, the difference between monkeys and humans, right, is there's a tiny proportion of DNA comparison between the two, and yet look how much smarter we are. And the way you hear this argument about aliens would come down and they know far more than that and we'd be monkeys. But here's the thing, though. Everything has its limits. You can't keep throwing energy at a problem. You can't keep throwing capacity, consumption. Everything hits a limit. It hits a wall. So I think, Phil, there's a limit on everything. Like, is there anything you can tell me that is limitless? There's nothing. So the question is, what is that limit? That's the question. So I don't know. It's
like what was that thing with there was a so-called law where computers every year get twice as fast.
Moore's law.
Moore's law.
But I think that's no longer true. I think it's kind of has reached.
Well, that's a good one. It has been doing that steadily. Moore's law started, I think, at 18 months, and it converted. Eventually, I think they settled on 2 years. But it was pretty. He predicted it. The market affected it. The expectation was Intel would have to come out with chips every blah blah blah. We're down to now a couple of atoms apart, the lanes that the information moves down the chips. So it's hit its limit. It hits a wall because of heat. It's really interesting. If something again, if you look at a couple of atoms. So if you look at Intel's strategy versus say Apple's strategy, right? Apple uses this. You've heard of the different chips that Apple use, and everyone's talking great. Really interesting. You should look up what Apple is doing about AI. Really interesting. Taking a very different view on the world. And I think they might have got some right. And you can talk about stock markets and how things are going. But what's interesting is that
buy Apple, buy 10 billion shares of Apple.
To researchers. But nobody, if you watch the graphs, ask it just to say, compare Intel chips to the M1 chip in Apple or M2, whatever the number is, right? And you look at the performance of the Intel chips, it's like this, and it's curving off now because they're hitting the limits, right? Apple uses what's called RISC architecture, which has been around for years. It's been I remember reading about this in college. Jeez. And so Apple uses a very different architecture to build its chips. And I think it was this time last year or thereabouts, maybe it's 2 years ago, Apple passed out Intel on performance. And this was all laid out now. Yeah, completely. So, but here's the thing. Again, everyone says, "Oh, well, Intel's doomed, blah blah blah," or Apple is going to take over the world. But the reality is, like, Intel aren't stupid either. So they're investing in new technologies, new ways of doing things, and things like that. I don't know how that's evolved since, but the reality is that everything has a limit, and we've hit our limit when it comes to that technology. But there are alternate ways of doing things. There's biocomputing. There's a whole rake of stuff for doing stuff in parallel that has only been looked at now. And there's quantum computing. There's a whole rake of things that are being researched and looked at, and only because of AI are we moving those dials quickly now. And so now we're back into, but you got to go a different stream, right? You can't, everything has a limit.
I suppose in a way,
go on.
Just to make an analogy, I was there's a movie called, oh gosh, I can't remember. It's a bunch of black women in the 60s who are computers working for NASA, and they're calculating hidden figures. Very good movie.
Actually. I've seen it. Great film.
Yeah. And the way their role basically disappears overnight because this new IBM mainframe comes along. Yeah. But what was interesting actually about it, almost reflecting what we've been talking about here, is one of the characters, one of the women, gets it into her, oh, hold on, they need someone to operate that computer. And she retrains, she learns how to use it. And suddenly they're like, oh my God, so I suppose in a way that's just the story of human advancement. We will move on and on and on. But it's just, I suppose my big thing about it is that just what we were saying about who controls it. I think if it remains in the hands of a tiny few of the tech bro oligarchs, that's a problem. But if it becomes more democratic in its ownership and benefits, say, I don't see much of a problem then. I think it's more, as you say, the human, not the actual thing itself.
So that's a really good point. People talk about the race to produce the perfect AI and all this type of stuff, and that eventually that race will be won and they'll own the world. Now, if you're looking from a military perspective, there might be some arguments in there. But if you're looking at the general evolution or how AI is evolving and things like that, there's a couple of things that are really interesting. First of all, when you ask a question of the latest version of Claude or whatever it is, it's far too advanced for the majority of questions that people are asking it. It's consuming far too much power. It's crazy. Like, it doesn't need to be that advanced. You could use a much more distilled version of it, and you'd still get pretty much the same answer in most cases.
Interesting. Okay.
So there's this disconnect between the power and the centers that we're building and what's actually required to solve a problem. So if you've got go back to the example of an android emptying a dishwasher, or a robot, right, emptying a dishwasher, it doesn't need the world's knowledge in its brain. Like, what's that going to do?
So as it's stacking the Delph, it's thinking about Nietzsche and Tchaikovsky.
It throws the plates over its head.
It shoots itself.
But not
What was the robot? Marvin.
Oh, Marvin. Marvin, the depressed robot.
Yeah.
Oh dear, this will all end in tears.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, my point in all that is that everyone is assuming that the rate of change and power requirement is keep going up. The data center is going to keep going up. And that's what, actually, speaking of Musk with SpaceX, they're looking to put data centers into space. Everybody goes, oh, well, that's the answer. And it's a great answer, to be honest. It's limitless power up there. It keeps it cool. Yeah. It's, they can send up the equivalent of Like the size of these rockets now are absolutely huge, and like the orbital, the capacity to send payloads to space is going to go from something like 300 tons annually to 300
Wow.
tons per day. So that's the
Really?
pace of change. Oh yeah, the cost is just plummeting. So that's an incredible sector. Like if you want to 3D print a heart, you do it up in space because the lattices, they don't collapse on each other. Now again, this is me reading this 3 years ago. It's probably changed.
That's interesting.
So, but there's a whole rake of things coming along that everyone's looking. Oh, that's never going to happen. Maybe not next year. Maybe not the year after. Maybe I don't know. It'll happen eventually anyway because a lot of this stuff has already been proven. So
I wonder is that part of the driver about the Artemis program? Because one of the reasons they didn't continue the Apollo program and stopped going to the moon in 1972 is because there was no, other than just to beat the Soviets, which they did, there was something to do it. But that's interesting. So they could potentially, you could say, if they lift capacity so it's economical to get loads of stuff up there, that means they could probably then set up places on the moon where you could have these huge factories, as you say, 3D printing things and so on. Amazing.
And it's not as far away as you think. And that includes asteroid mining, all of that type of stuff. So the next frontier is out there, and it's so it literally it all down to, once again, it's all down to money, isn't it? And it's all down to, so the reality is, if you've got a ship that can go to an asteroid, we've already landed and collected samples from an asteroid. Look, it's not.
That's right. That
so
was
we've
amazing,
done it now. To do it at a capacity at a level of kind of commercial level of scaling, that's a whole different animal. But the reality is this: reusability of rockets is already. We're nearly there already. And if you take Starship, which is SpaceX's main new version of its latest iteration, it's like, the RT tower out there, it's like 1.5 times nearly the height of that. And it can send up to space, as I said to you, a fully pre-conditioned science lab or data center.
Wow.
So you just plug it in, send it up, open up the solar panels. It's got 24/7 light. There's your
incredible.
Now listen, they have a lot of stuff to figure out. But this is the bit though, before you go invest in SpaceX. Here's the very interesting thing. There is a company that's just come out with a data center that sits in a ball in the sea, right?
Really?
So so it uses the tidal wave, right, to provide energy, and it uses the cooling of the water to keep it cool, right? I mean, it's genius. Now look, once again, for every 100 ideas or 1,000, one may not come to, but that's a human piece with AI innovating at a ferocious pace. So
amazing.
Who knows what's going to happen? And it'll be probably something else that makes it all happen. I mean, the other big one is energy coming from space. But there are companies popping out of the States now that are building, actually a European one, I think, that tested this idea where it's you're beaming energy back to stations on Earth to consume the energy and drive turbines.
So you've got extremely efficient solar collectors in space,
24/7,
somehow
beaming the energy down.
Transmissible power down to that's interesting.
Right.
Wow.
Now you go, okay, that's amazing. Of course, you want to tap the sun. You want to do, fusion's the answer. But again, we could spend hours talking about this stuff. It's
fusion's always 10 to 20 years away.
It is.
It has been for decades.
But you know what though? What's interesting is
since the word fusion was made.
Yeah.
The other thing, I suppose, sorry, I didn't think of it at the time, but probably the biggest application in medicine would be pathology and radiology, because the whole thing about, do you remember the cervical cancer screening scandal? That's because you had a human fallibility in screening these very difficult, boring, you could say, samples. But again, AI you'd almost presume you'd near have 100%.
Just on that one quickly, there's a French company who's just come out with a product. It's a robot. You stand there in front of the robot, and what it does is it takes an image of your entire body on the outer side and what it does is you then, on a regular, once a year, you go get the computer to do the exact same thing, and it says, oh, that mole has grown by 1%.
All right. Or I thought you were going to say, you fat bastard, you've eaten too much cake.
Less cake next year, more salad.
Yeah, more salad.
But I think I've heard mole mapping. I mean, that's, absolutely.
But just an example of, early detection and all that type of stuff. It's great. And the other one as well, actually, it's really interesting. We've missed it, I think. I'm pretty sure we have, I think my kids, I think they're going to outdo age dying. That's a
Really?
big thing to see. Yeah, I really do. And
we were actually, Greg, talking about this on a podcast we did about
Oh,
3
were
or
you?
4 times ago. Yeah, we said that because I think it was you that said it or someone, that the average child born now will get to about 125.
Oh, we
And
did, yeah.
And
yeah,
at some point, it grows faster than you're growing.
yeah, it's. What do you think,
I-
Ron? You weren't too
Well, no,
positive on this.
I was
were you?
I was probably disagreeing in the sense that unless we can majorly change our physiology, because we're just designed to age, like all animals. Turtles 200, dogs 10, humans 75, 80,
Well, we're supposed to
100,
be
whatever.
30 though. Yeah, but anyway, go
Yeah,
on.
exactly. But it's just over in the entire, recorded history. The eldest person was a French woman, 122. She died in 91 or 92, and they haven't found anyone to exceed that yet. So far, that's the limit. But I think more to the point that, and this comes back to the whole technology thing. I think maybe perhaps you could have the option to upload your consciousness to a cloud, a system, you know what I mean? And you live in a so your physical body was going to go like anything else, but you could technically live forever, as your intelligence, your mind could be there forever.
I'd say we're nearer to the. Look, and these things are all plausible. But and it's interesting actually, Phil, the faster than light thing. There is actually a mathematical paper that's been produced by and NASA are funding it. And its probability, excuse the term, but its probability of actually happening, it's going up and up and up, because they're slowly chipping away at the problems associated with it. Now, it's still a long way off, but it is now technically possible. I think it's gone from something requiring the consumption of the energy of a sun. They're now down to the consumption of the energy of a planet or something. In other words,
to exceed the speed of light. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, just on the age thing though, right?
Yeah, sorry.
I think you need to go practical. The Americans did a stat on it, right? If you were to die only if all disease was eradicated and there's no longer aging, the average age of death would be 800.
Really?
You get hit by a car or something, right? Okay, so the average age is 800, right? So the thing is that if you need these key organs to live, right, and you're able to 3D print just about every organ. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
But then you just replace them, right? So
true.
Now I'm being very simple about it, but I'm talking, like my kids now, their kids, it's about 100 years away. So the question is, in 100 years' time, do you think we'll have evolved it to that point? I think at the rate of change with AI, especially, I wouldn't have believed it before AI, but now with AI, I think
that brings to mind Trigger's broom. I've had this broom for 50 years. It's only had 7 new handles, and would you really be you if every part was replaced? But just to say, the only flaw in that are that's the thing. And in bloody hell, it'd be a very crowded planet if no one was dying. But I think the biggest, think about it. But I mean, the biggest obstacle is until they could probably 3D print or repair a brain, if you know what I mean. Because one of the things that definitely is not capable, shall we say, very rarely of living on to extreme old age is our brains. Like dementia and Alzheimer's, all that stuff. That wasn't even a big thing until we all started living into our 80s and so on. You go back to our grandparents' age, particularly. So everyone was dying at 65, 70, and it was a very rare thing. So that could be one.
Yeah, good point.
Again, a limitation that would have to be overcome before functional immortality.
I've given 100 years on it, though.
Listen. I mean, if you look 100 years back, what are we? It'd be 1926. There's flappers and prohibition. Like life has moved on a hell of a lot. If you look at any field,
gone backwards as well, though. That's the other thing.
Well, that's true.
Unfortunately,
in
a lot of ways.
One thing.
Yeah.
One thing we do know is that AI is going to live forever. It's kind of if you saw the modern version of the Time Traveler, I don't know if the H.G. Wells sci-fi.
Yeah,
and
I haven't seen that actually. Yeah, Samantha Mum is in that, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
It's with Guy Pearce. Yeah, and Samantha Mum. And he goes forward in time, and the Earth blows up because the moon fell onto the Earth and stuff. But anyway. But he basically gets to Earth about 1990 now, and of course they're way out. But there's this computer talking to him, which is actually an actual hologram, right? So then he goes forward in time literally about 500,000 years, and the computer's still there. And he goes, he said, and everything's blown up, the library's gone, but the computer hologram is still in the hall.
Yeah, very good.
And he says, I remember you from 500,000 years ago. And he hadn't changed. You know what
Fantastic.
I mean?
That's pretty mind-bending stuff.
That was a really clever scene. Really clever scene. Yeah. There's a sci-fi series I read. It was very clever. The idea was that the world had evolved, and we'd gone to space, and we were living in all the planets, and and but AI decided to just ignore us. And it actually just went off and set up its own civilizations and worlds and started simulating the creation of Earth and all this type of stuff just out of interest. But it just basically ignored humans. But
that was my theory on the
squirrels argument. It's not the squirrels argument. It's another argument that says they actually just don't care and they go off and just do their own thing.
Actually,
I can see that.
Actually, it was myself and Ron were talking about Fermi's paradox. You know Fermi's paradox, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically saying that, for those that don't know, is that if aliens do exist, in theory, they should be here by now. Because even if they have 100,000 years or 10,000 years, look at what we've done in 100 years, they should be here by now. And I said to Ron, maybe they're just like us and an anthill. We just pass by the anthill, we see it, and we just say, "Oh, there's some ants."
No
interest.
Or
no interest,
like the what's it in the Star Trek thing? Pre-warp civilization.
Discover warp drive before you get included. Yeah.
Exactly. Maybe. Yeah.
Okay, Greg. Just on behalf of myself and Ronan and the Tangents, the two of us, this is our 15th podcast now. Ron, I'm just talking.
Is this really? Wow.
I think so. Yeah. But this time we had an excerpt. Somebody who actually knew what they were talking about.
That was the first time.
It's the first time.
Who thinks he knows? Anyway.
Yeah, well, he knows about 10 times more than we do. But Greg, listen, thank you very much on behalf of us both.
Absolutely. Thanks a million.
You're so welcome. I really
was
enjoyed it, and well done. Keep the podcast going. It's brilliant.
Great.
Well done.
Yeah,
okay.
Keep plugging on. Okay, guys.
Okay. Take care.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.